Welcome to today's webinar, Hands-on Lab, Getting Started with AWS. Our presenter today is David Potes. David is a manager in Solutions Architecture, AWS. David, welcome. The floor is now yours. You can unmute your microphone and begin.
Hey, thanks, Quentin. And thanks, everybody, for coming today. A little bit about today's webinar. So the structure here is designed so that that you can actually do the work too. We want you to walk away with something that you've actually done. And this is be considered a very hands-on lab. Quentin said this about 19 times, but it's going to be a lot more fun if you have an AWS account. If you don't have one, I would start that process. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. You will need a credit card, and you also you will need to do a telephone verification. Definitely kick that off if you haven't already. It's way more fun that way. A little bit about me, kind of a clunky title. It means that I manage a team of solutions architects, but don't worry, I still get my hands dirty. I still stay kind of neck deep in this stuff. So you can trust me as a reasonably authoritative source. What we'll cover today is we're going to walk through creating an AWS account. I'm going to talk a little bit about identity and access management and some best practices around that. We're going to spend some time creating buckets for our website, and then we're going to deploy the content to the S3 buckets for that website. No servers will be harmed in this this tutorial. We're not actually going to spin up any servers. We're going to show you how easy it is to get started hosting your own website just kind of directly through S3. I'm not an HTML programmer or jockey, so my web page is not going to look great, but we can show you that it'll work. So we're going to deploy the website, and then we've got some work we can do in Route 53, which is our DNS service. And then we'll talk about a couple of optional things. If you want to create your own domain name, you can do that. That does take a little time, so we may do just like in a cooking show where the stuff is a little bit already cooked. So let's kick it off without further ado. So getting started with AWS, and I kind of talked about what we would cover today. So registering a domain name, associating that with your website, and speeding up your website with CloudFront. These are all optional, but we'll talk through them and show you some examples there. But if you do just kind of the first steps of through deploying your website, you'll actually have something that you can look at. So I want to talk a little bit about the free tier, and I can go in depth a little bit later. But the AWS Free Tier is designed really to give you the opportunity to experiment without breaking the bank. And by not breaking the bank, I mean that everything that we're going to do today can be done within the free tier. And if you want to check it out, there's a link here in the deck. And the number one question I always get is, will we get access to the slide deck? And you sure will. So no worries there. For many of the free tier services, you're able to use them kind of from the first year, from the day your account's created. Some of the services actually allow you usage ongoing. So even beyond that first year, you can go ahead and use those services. So good deal. Check it out. We'll take a look at the page a little later, but definitely something that is worthwhile. So signing up is easy. I talked about this just a little bit. It's going to look a lot like pretty much anything else that you signed up for. You'll click through. You'll enter some information so that we can identify you. You'll need a credit card, and then there's a telephone verification. We take fraud pretty seriously, so we want to make sure that there's a real person, and it's just a little more involved than a CAPTCHA, but the same intent. So one of the first things that we're going to do in our new account, people always ask me, what's the first thing I should do? I've created an account, now what? And going to kind of cut through a little bit of the fog on that. And, the very first thing that I would recommend doing is creating IAM users and then protecting your root account. So IAM stands for Identity and Access Management, right? So this is where we identify the people that can log in to this AWS account. And the best practice is to avoid using root. So it's kind of if you've ever logged into a Linux system as root, that we try to avoid working in that mode because with great power comes great responsibility, and the root account can do some things that we probably don't need in kind of our day-to-day usage. And once we create users and groups, and this will look familiar to you, this is a pretty straightforward interface, we can set policies on those users. And that allows us to decide, what users can and cannot do. And we can actually go to a pretty good fine-grained level of detail. But we give you some templates to simplify that, and we'll take a look at that. Second thing that I usually recommend people do is enable multi-factor authentication. So that's MFA, and all it says is here's another way to identify you, so that the bad people can't necessarily get into your account. And there's a couple of ways that you can use MFA. So the icon here shows the icon here shows a virtual hardware token. So if you've ever used like a Gemalto device or something like that, that's what that would look like. But you don't have to use a physical device. You can use a virtual device like a Google Authenticator, or you can actually do MFA to your users via SMS. And if I accidentally logged out of my account, you get to see that in action. So definitely want to do that so that it makes it a little bit harder. And in fact, I recommend enabling MFA anywhere you can. So you have enough number of important accounts that you use, enable that. And if they don't, maybe look at a different vendor because it's really important. So I want to talk a little bit about storage. We're avoiding the use of servers today, but it's really hard to avoid using storage, right? So storage is something that's almost always going to come up in your applications and in the things that you work with. And we think AWS is a great choice for storage. So a couple of key things that I'd like to point out. Pay as you go. So there's no upfront investment, no commitment. We really do believe that you should pay for what you use. And I appreciate that as both a consumer as well as somebody that's working for AWS. And what that does is that it moves you away from this notion of capacity planning. In the old days, you had to plan 12, 18 months, 3 years ahead, and many times guess at what you would be using and then pay for it up front and hope that you kind of got the numbers right. Some people are better at that than others, but rarely does it come in exact. So you either overpay for the resources that you're using, or you have to go back and get more, and often that's kind of a long cycle. We're big fans of self-service administration, so we give you great tools to do that either through the API or the console, or if you're writing software, we have SDKs that allow you to do integrations with our services, especially the storage services. And storage is very durable, so we'll look at that specifically on some of the services, but you can enhance your durability by putting data in the cloud. Gets you away from the risks of physical media, so like a lost hard drive or a tape, and really allows you to get to market faster and focus on your business and not necessarily in your infrastructure. So what I like to talk about is the metric that I like is how long between when you have an idea in the shower and you can actually test it out. And with AWS and using AWS storage, that can be minutes or hours rather than days, weeks, or months. So good option for you. And it's the S3 is designed for 11 nines of durability. So that's a fantastically large number of nines. What it means is that we've built enough redundancy and services and controls into the system that you can trust that the items are going to be there when you need them. And we make it very secure. So we talked about IAM, right? We can do identity and access policies. We can put policies against the buckets that we're using, the S3 buckets. We can do authentication and encryption, and all of those great things that give you a very secure experience for you, your friends, and your customers. It's also scalable. So S3 is essentially unlimited capacity. You can easily scale up and scale down, and I would like to highlight that a little bit. Oftentimes we talk about elasticity, and that's actually bidirectional. So, the ability to scale down when you need fewer resources is really often the challenge, with providers. But we make it easy to do, and we give a lot of design tools and functionality that allow you to both scale down and scale up. So, some great features in AWS Storage, and we can look a little closer. So we kind of have three main categories of storage. We have, if we kind of start at the most fundamental level, we have Amazon EBS, which is a block storage for use with EC2 servers. So this is going to look a lot like, disks that you might have attached in a data center. Now it's a service, and it's not actually the same functionality underneath, but you can use it to connect block devices to your instances. Now, we give you a couple of options in that, and if you have questions about EBS, feel free to ask us in the Q&A. All the folks on here are very experienced with that level of storage. Now, if we kind of step up, through one layer of abstraction, that brings us to Amazon S3. And S3 is an object storage. So we're going to store things at the object level, but we're not going to expose that as a block, quote unquote, disk drive that you can access. And then we have Amazon Glacier. So this is really great spot for things that you need to archive, but you don't necessarily need to access frequently. So think of it as, what might have been, a backup target in the past. But Glacier gives us some functionality that makes it very, very cool, and we can do some interesting things with it. I'll give you a great example. We can set up lifecycle policies on S3 that says, when data is 180 days or a year old, go ahead and move that to cheaper storage. In this case, I might jump directly to Glacier. In other cases, there's an intermediate step that we can actually use to step through that. So great. We kind of talked about these. There's all those nines in print. It's definitely quite a few. Internet scale storage, right? So if you think about some of the largest customers in the world have talked about their experiences on AWS, and it really does give you internet scale storage. So it says grow without limits. There may be like a theoretical or physical limit, but I don't know of anybody that's hitting that. And it's cost effective. You'll hear me come back to this quite a bit. I'm very frugal by nature, so I'm always looking to build things in a way that is incredibly cost effective, because the truth is, you can build something that works, but if it costs you a fortune to operate it, we really haven't changed the game for you. So, low price per month, no upfront cost if you don't want it, no commitment. And the one of my favorite parts is, security. Security is job zero for us. And, we take that very seriously. And we've made massive investments in making sure that, the products that we have are secure and scalable, and hopefully in many cases easy to use. So S3 key features, we're going to spend some time in S3 today, so you get to see some of this. We have Great management tools, so you can actually directly manage buckets through the console, which, kind of helps the on-ramp into using it. We have lifecycle policies, like I mentioned, and you can monitor your spend. So, set billing limits and alerts and say, hey, if I'm spending too much, text me, and tell me to stop. Also, lots of functionality around data protection. So we can do versioning of objects. So when we upload a new one, the other one's still there, and we can go back to it if we need to. We can actually turn on multi-factor delete. So I talked about MFA earlier. This is similar, except that you need to provide a second piece of information if you actually do want to delete stuff. Encryption is easy. We offer a couple of ways to do it. Manage your own keys. Let us manage the keys. But we have a strong interest in encryption in as many places as possible. And with S3, it's kind of cool because you're essentially offloading the encryption to us. You can actually do time-limited access. So if you wanted to make something available for a certain period of time via S3, you can do that. And that's something that is supported in the functionality. So good stuff on S3. I'm a big fan. I hope you will be too by the end of this session. So here's a great example of a customer that really took advantage of scale. So Pinterest, you've probably heard of it. It absolutely blew up a few years ago, and is one of the top kind of social networks. But as opposed to text, because they're picture oriented, they're storing a lot more data. So 8 billion S3 objects and over 410 terabytes of data. That has probably grown. But they're able to do all of that with a very small engineering team because scaling with S3 is simple, so no need to worry about any difficult clustering technologies. A little bit about CloudFront. This is a builder slide. So CloudFront is our CDN, and CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. And really the idea behind a content delivery network is that we want to speed the distribution of content. So say that I have a very popular website and I have people all over the world accessing it. This is a way that I can deliver data to what we call the edge, which is a metaphor for being close to the customer, right? And we deliver that data to the edge so that they get responses faster. And if you've ever tried to access things in, say, North America from China or India or parts of the interior, there is some delay built in. The laws of physics get in the way. The data have to go across the cable over thousands of miles. But if we could store that stuff closer, we could give much better responses, and we can automatically route our viewers to the best location for them. And as I mentioned, it's going to cache that content at the edge. So static assets that we have, images, HTML or JavaScript, all of that can be cached at the edge for faster retrieval. It can also accelerate dynamic content too. So I'll give you a great example. Say that we have a website and there's a query stream we can pass saying do it in Spanish or Italian or English. We can actually use that at the edge to deliver the right content at the right time without having to go back to our origin server. And really gives you great scalability. So if you're running an application and you want to provide additional scalability, offload some of the work from kind of your core, CloudFront is a good choice to do this. So a little bit about the structure of it. I have some charts here. A little bit of this is redundant, but CloudFront does make it very easy to build in security features, and we expose this as a self-service tool, so you can access it quite a bit. So it's globally distributed. As of February 2017, There's 70 edge locations in 45 cities on 5 continents. I think that we'll definitely continue to see that grow, although I'm not sure that we'll see anything on that 7th continent because it's a little cold down there. So Amazon.com trusts CloudFront. Obviously the fairly large retail site that does a lot more than books, and all of these are backed by CloudFront. So the next time you're streaming off of Prime or looking at detailed images on the retail site, think about what goes behind that, and we can kind of understand that the tools of very large companies have been democratized so that everybody can use them. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, so we are going to switch over to demo time. So what I wanted to show you, first of all, is for those of you that haven't yet done it, this is kind of the main homepage for AWS, and this is where you can sign up for AWS if you haven't already. Kind of last best chance if you want to get involved in the demo directly. We can definitely do that. All right. And then I did want to share something else with you before we get started. So here's some information on the free tier. So I wanted to share this. So one of the things that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be using Amazon S3. 5 gigs of free storage, the 20,000 gets. So that's when somebody requests something from S3 that you own and then puts our uploads. So you have that for the first 12 months after sign up, a pretty good deal. We have a number of other services here that have some free parts to get you started. We know that people want to experiment, so we make that available. The other thing that I wanted to share before we got started is what the console login looks like. So when you first log in, you're going to see something like this, right? So you can create an account from here, and then once you're first logged in, you're going to log in with your email. I guess you could use your mobile number. I don't know a lot of people that actually do that. And then you can go ahead and log in, and you'll see your console. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk us through a couple of things that we want to do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have some demo time where you can work along working on this, and we'll be able to answer questions. So feel free to follow along if you already have an account, but know that we've reserved time to essentially do this as lab work, and allows you to listen at this part and then follow along a little later. So I'm going to hop over into my management. Let's create an IAM user. We're going to create this one, and we'll say demo 2017. So that's my username, and that's how somebody's going to log in. We think this is a person, so we're going to give them console access. So I like to use the auto-generated password. It's easy to reuse passwords if you're doing a custom password. And then we can force somebody to create a new password the next time they sign in, which is great, right? That allows us to kind of get out of that business of having to know what the password is. So the next step is we're going to set up permissions. And what you can do is that you have a couple of options here. If you've already created a group and you're familiar with something like, say, Active Directory or LDAP, you probably get the notion of creating groups, and then the groups have permissions, and then you assign users to a group. If you're just getting started, you probably don't have a group or an existing user to copy permissions from. But what we can do is, at least initially, you can actually attach an existing policy directly. And what we do is we make it easy for you to create a policy. So, if you want to jump in and work in lovely JSON, you can definitely do that. But for most of the stuff that you're going to do, frankly, there's probably going to be a policy that already exists. Two common policies that come up, are administrator access, right? And that will give you full access to all of the sources. But also there is power users, and I'm actually a big fan of using power user access. Basically, this gives you full access to all of the AWS services and resources, but doesn't give the ability to create additional users. So, if you leave somebody the ability to create users, they can cause all kinds of mischief, right? So we want to limit people from being able to do that. We can always switch back to a different account if we want to, have those services. So, we can set up this policy, and then it gives us a chance to review everything. So now I've created a user. I'm going to auto-generate a password. I'm going to force them to reset their password when they log in, and then I'm going to force them to use that managed policy. So it looks good. Let's go ahead and create that user. All right, success. So what we can see here is that there's a little bit of a different console access once we've created an IAM user. And the format is your account number .signin.aws.amazon.com. So when you create this user, at least the first time, you may want to copy this over and put it in Notepad or create a bookmark for it, because this is going to be the primary way that you'll be accessing the console. So when you first create the user, we can see the options here. You have the ability to show the password, and really this is going to be the only time that you have access to do that. You can also download a quick CSV of the credentials. Do that so that you can log in at least once, and then you'll be able to change your password and move on from there. All right, so now we've created this user, and if you remember, we talked about, what's kind of the first thing that I should do once I create that user, and I strongly recommend that you do go through the MFA device setup. So it's pretty straightforward. You have a couple of options here. If you have a token, that's your hardware MFA device. A virtual MFA device is usually an app running on a smartphone. Third option for IAM users is you can actually choose to get an SMS. Now, quick gotcha on that one that I learned is if you're going to be on an airplane, it's a little difficult to get SMS to your phone. So you may want to think about one of these other two devices if you're looking to get access from the friendly skies. So now that we've created our user, and I'm not going to set up MFA on this one because this user is going to go away in about an hour or so I'm not too concerned about it. But definitely recommend that you set that up. So great. Is there anything else that we might want to do with this user? Well, yes. So some users are going to need an access key. And in fact, if you're doing any functionality with the API, you're definitely going to need that. But you don't want to create one if there's no necessity to do so. And an access key is really a public-private key pair. So you have an access key ID, which is not secret, right? That's going to come up. But you have a secret one that's only available to you, and that's something that allows you to access systems such as the EC2 virtual instances without having to do password authentication. There's a lot of issues with password authentication, and this is a much more secure way to connect to your systems. So definitely strongly recommend doing that for users that you want to use. I'm going to omit that step today because I actually already have a user, and as I said, the life expectancy of this user is about 65 minutes, so not too worried about it. So now that we've done that, we've walked through, and we've got a user really ready to take the next step. So we're going to spend some time in S3, but I'm going to give you a special console trick that you may or may not be aware of. So if we click this little push pin, I believe it's supposed to be, you can actually drag service icons, right up into the bar here. So, say, change my mind, no more S3, let's do it all on Redshift, right? I can do that, click the button, good to go. So quick tip, helps you when you're flipping back and forth between services, and gives you that ability to do that. So, first step when we actually do this is we do need to create some buckets for our website. So a little bit about buckets. The name has to be globally unique. So it may be that somebody already has the bucket name that you want. Be creative. Treat it like a domain name. You'll figure out something that works for you. If I were to type in website, I think it's highly unlikely that bucket would be available. But if I typed in website and then 9911234, and I spelled website correctly, that's probably going to be available for us. A couple of restrictions: you can't end with a dash or a period. It has to be DNS compliant. It has to be DNS compliant, and that means that certain characters are verboten when we're creating this. And then, so I do have a bucket that's already existing, but I'm going to create another one just to show you how it works. Okay, so let's say that we're creating a website, getting started with us.com, right? So now I've got a bucket. It reflects the website name that I'm going to be hosting, and that's actually something that you do want to do. Now, I am located on the lovely West Coast, so I'm going to use Oregon. Usually, I find that Oregon's a little bit cheaper than Northern California, so if you're on the West Coast, I'd probably do that before doing another one. So now I've created a bucket, right? And I have a couple of options that I can set on that bucket. You'll remember I said that we can enable versioning. This is great if you're sharing files and there may be changes to those files, but you want the ability to go back. Logging, we'll talk about logging a little later. We're going to come back in and modify this, and then we have the option to do tags. So say that I want to tag it for my website project, and then I wanted to search later and say let me look at my billing records and see, how much my website project actually cost me, so I know, what to charge. So next up is properties. So we can set an internal user. We can make this bucket public, but we're gonna skip that for now, and then we're gonna set the permissions. And this is actually a place that has changed in the console recently. So I'm going to go ahead and create this bucket without permissions and then go back into it and show you how to do it. So, so now I've created this bucket and I can click into it and I can see a view. So this is fairly new in the console too. We've done quite a bit to make this a lot friendlier to use. So you've got some tabs here and things are broken down into areas that make sense. So, we can see again our properties. We have some advanced settings. If you have questions about the advanced settings, feel free to ask in Q&A and in the chat. And we're going to spend a little time looking at permissions here. So what I actually want to do is I'm going to set a bucket policy. And a bucket policy is really just a JSON implementation of a policy. So I have something right here. Maybe a little small to read, but that's okay. It's not super fun to read anyway. So I'm gonna just kind of paste it into here. And what this is saying, this is it's syntactically JSON. But all we're saying is that anybody can get an object from this bucket, right? Because we don't know who's going to be accessing this bucket. It's going to be the internet. They're going to be anonymous. So we have to allow that access to be able to read. And this is just kind of concise in a policy. So now if I save that, one thing that you have to do here is change it to the bucket name, right? So we actually have to do getting started with us.com. So let's try that one more time. Ta-da. Okay, great, awesome. So now we've got a bucket and we've set the right permissions to it, but it doesn't necessarily have any objects in it. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that when we talk about quote unquote deploying your website. So we have we've created the URL, we've created the bucket, and we are ready to create 2 additional buckets. So as part of the tutorial, you actually want to do 3 buckets. So this is my actual bucket that I created previously. Has a couple of web pages in here that we can use. If we double check the permissions, we can see that it has a bucket policy very similar to what we put in here, except we're referencing this is actually my folder. So getting started with .us. I thought that is a decent domain name, so don't be too hard on me. We need 2 more buckets when we do this. So we're going to create one that lists the website as www.gettingstarted.us. So this is for my website. You'll be replacing that with whatever example that you're using. And then we want a bucket to hold the logs. So I created this bucket to hold the logs. But this is one that we're not going to make public, right? Because we don't want anybody reading our logs. That's for us, not to be shared. Too much good information in there, frankly, that folks would do nothing but cause problems with it. All right, so quick level check, right? Now we've created our buckets. We've set the right permissions on them so folks can read them. And now we need to actually put some content in that bucket. So it's actually pretty simple. So if you go in here into the bucket settings, so this is my actual one, and you click upload, you can add files. And if it'll add files directly from Windows Explorer. Or from the Finder on the Mac, or you'll probably have to use the command line if you're using Solaris. So I'll leave that up to you. So what I've done is I've actually uploaded a couple of files here. I've uploaded an index file and an error file, so that we can actually serve some content. So great. We just need one more step, and then we can actually serve this as a website. So if we go over to, properties. So if we go over to properties, we have an option here called static website hosting. So this is this allows us to do a website that does client-side technologies, so JavaScript or HTML or that good stuff. If the web technology actually needs a virtual server behind it, we can actually still do some things with static website hosting in this, but we'd have to do a little more of a hybrid design. But for us, we're actually going to do this. It's a pretty simple HTML site. So we just tell it, what's the name of the index document? Great. Often index.html, and then optionally, we can add an error document, and my error is error.html. Very creative, but it works. And then we save this info, and now we're serving our website from this. So if you take a look at, getting started with us, I used the lorem ipsum generator So don't try to read this; it's not Latin. And then there's a photo of Amazon's first homepage. So they used to be a pretty interesting book company. I think they're destined for big things. So now I've got my website up here, right? And I can find that from an endpoint, right? But how do I find that endpoint? So if we click back into the objects here, we have our error document, we have our index document, and then that one image I stuck us in there. So we've got all of these things going. Feel free to poke around inside the console if you have questions. This is our endpoint right here. So when we've created the static website hosting, essentially it creates a URL that we can use to access it. And if we actually break this down, you'll remember that I said I was on the West Coast, and US West 2 is actually Oregon. So that's kind of where you're doing that at. And so now we've got our static website up. We can see it. Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to step into one of the optional things, but in reality, you could walk away at that point and you've got a website, right? One of the optional things that people sometimes want to do is to create a domain. So just a quick refresher. A domain name is used to give a friendly name to a website, and then that is handed off through a DNS infrastructure, and allows you to give it a friendlier name so that they can access your website. So a little bit of 101, but just want to make sure everybody was clear. Now, what a lot of people don't know that you can actually register domains through Amazon. So you can actually type in a name into this console and see if it's available, right? So let's see if that's available. Probably not. And it'll go through and check. It'll check and see if that exists. Turns out Amazon.com is taken. Who knew, right? But it does give you some options here for other things that might be available. I'm totally joking here. Don't try to register one of these names because that probably isn't going to last very long. We have trademark laws and all that stuff. So I did have a name already that's registered through a different registrar that is getting started with .us. Okay, so I've got that, but what I can do is I can actually do the hosting from AWS. So this is what's known as Route 53. This is our DNS service, very easy to use. And if we look at my record here, this is where I created getting started .us. So what you do here is you'll go through and you'll create a record set. And that's just saying, hey, this is what I want this to be. So let's say that, I had a user site. I could do users.gettingstartedwithus, and I could say that, I want to send this somewhere else, right? And if I wanted to do an alias, what's wonderful is that if you have existing website endpoints that aren't in use, and they're not in use, and it'll show up here, and you can link to those, and then you're able to give things a name. So that's kind of the second piece. Consider this optional. This is probably something that you will want to work with if you're creating a commercial website or something, kind of outside of just a project. But in reality, to prove that it works and a demonstration of functionality, you can actually use this to, you can just use the endpoint that we talked about. So remember clicking a static website hosting. This right here is actually a valid endpoint. So if we just do a little copy and we take away our free tier screen, boom, there's my website, right? And so it took about a lot of talking, so probably 15 minutes to get this set up the first time, and much faster after that. So that kind of concludes the demo portion of the work that we're doing here.